contemporary art world, I thought, isn't it strange that people don't know we are nature, and we are making art, but we are nature. Secondly, how is it possible that people don't know that what we use is nature? This computer is oil and minerals reconfigured or whatever. You know, so everything around us comes from nature, even if we transform it. And so it became, should we try another one? Want to try another one? I have other ones. No. Let's try another one. Maybe this one. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So now we go full screen. Full screen. So slowly I developed a curating. So I did shows, you know, at the Royal Botanical Garden and so on. But in Canada I ran into problems because of politics, because I defended a separatist artist, and then the Canada would not give me money, and neither would the separatists, because I was not in the right language group. So I became a strange little animal who had to play dead, but also do everything. And what I learned was that exchange builds a strength. What I mean to say is, when I showed European artists in Canada, people learned the language, and in Europe they learned about the Canadian and the American artists. It became a way of extending the language of nature, working with nature. Why? Because it's another way to go. You don't have to always do video. You can do video about your nature piece, but you don't have to be confined to cut and paste and printing with a digital printer. This is not art. You know, Daumier used a pencil and didn't have a sharpener. He turned the pencil to sharpen it when he drew. So that's intelligence, you know? So I worked with the natives, the Amerindian artists, the chiefs in the West Coast, because the forests were being cut. The old trees were 400 years old, and the timber company cut half a valley, which was a sacred valley for this tribe, because it was one of their migration routes for the Squamish tribe in British Columbia. So the chief brought us up to the top of the mountain. Half the trees weren't cut, and the speaker of the tribe got on top of the mountain. They brought up a sculpture of a woman and put it on top, because the women kept the knowledge in the tribe over generations. The women were the library. And the speaker of the tribe said, the forests are our trees, and the forest is our library. The trees are our books. This is our knowledge, you know? And in a way, culture is like the world's cultures are like a forest, and each culture is a tree in that forest. And if we lose our cultural identity, we end up floating, you know. This is not good. And languages are being lost every day in the world. I think 10 or 20 languages a year are lost in the world. Wade Davis, the anthropologist, said, when you lose a language, you lose your knowledge also. Your knowledge of herbs, of healing, of many things are captured in a language that cannot be recaptured once it's gone, right? So this is a sculpture by Urs Twellman. It is a library cut in a book into a tree. I will show you some of my nature artists. This is Stephen Siegel, recycled newspaper. 20 tons of recycled newspaper at Artisella in Italy, put into a sculpture.
20 tons?
Yeah.
20 tons of
paper? I think so, yeah. And it becomes green and then gray, and then trees grow in it, seedlings will grow in it later. So it becomes a new environment. This is Agnes Denish from... Is it still at the place? Or? Yeah, it's still there in Italy, northern Italy, near the Swiss border there. It's a sculpture park, Artisella. You know.
Argosella is a famous place.
Yeah, famous. Yeah. They, anyway, this is Agnes Denish, who planted a wheat field next to Manhattan to prove a kind of a connection to food in an urban context, because people don't know the relatedness of our lives and where food comes from. So this was one of her early pieces called a wheat field in the city. I was staying now in Romania. I met Pokorny and I wrote about him. So I introduced his work here because he's from Eastern Europe, and this is one of his sewing pieces underwater in Sicily, I think.
In Romania.
Romania, this is
the first. Yeah.
The first one. And in that culture, sewing was an important part of their of carrying information, actually. The way a dress was sewn told you about the person and what village they came from, sure, and many things. So Pokorny started to do these weavings and sewings, and even a piece on a brick wall in this way. And this is his home in Tirgomurash, one of his other sculptures of the Faludi.
This is not natural.
Faludi.
This is just
yeah.
Faludi.
This is in St. George, a wood piece he did called Bridge. This is another Transylvanian artist, Peter Alpar, in South Korea. These are instruments for sound made large by the Gongju River. This is Faludeng Tunda. Rings of energy around a tree. The tree is the source of a calm energy, and this is what I call an open sculpture because it does not define the space, it leaves it open. It does not close like modernist sculpture did. This is another of these newspaper pieces by Stephen Seagal. And here's a recycled plastic sculpture also that he done. This is Niels Udo, who was from the first generation. There are 3 generations of artists who did nature art. The land artists in America and Richard Long and so on. And from Europe, Hans Hack and so on. And then there is the second generation, which were earth art, closer, smaller works. And the third generation now is bio art. But social ecology is another thing that is next to this. Joseph Beuys' social actions are part of a movement which is less about art than community and connectivity to nature. For many nature artists, earth artists, the look is important. But for social ecology, it's not as important what it is or what it represents. More important, what happens, I guess. But this is Niels Udo in Paris, Jardin des Plantes, one of his pieces. And this is an earlier piece from off the coast of near Hamburg called Waterhouse by Udo. This is a Canadian photographer, Bertinsky. He's documenting production, overproduction in China and all over the world. He did a book on oil now, The End of Oil, and this is a landscape of tires from California to show the scale of production now in the world we live in. This is a Japanese artist, Ichi Ikeda. At my show in Canada, Royal Botanical Gardens, he did this tree which was called Future Compass, and this is like an old growth tree made from branches which holds water, and the 2 trees point north-south like a compass. This is in a rock garden which was built by unemployed workers in the 30s in Canada. And the idea is the forests hold the water, and it's important we keep the forests going in the world. In Pakistan, the flooding is because all the wood is gone. Okay? In many parts of the world, flooding, in Brazil probably, where they've done the cutting too, it affects where the water is, and it causes deserts, actually, over a long time. This is another piece with the 5 continents by Ikeda. This is a nuclear site in America, 3 Mile Island, where there was an accident and it was evacuated. And this artist, Alan Sonfist, put clean earth in a circle. And the pollen landed and grew new growth in a polluted area. This is an artist who moves into architecture, Friedrich Hundertwasser, who passed away now. Anyway, this is one of his earth architecture pieces. So you can take old buildings, you can resurface them and recycle buildings. You don't have to tear them down. In North America, the tendency is to tear down buildings and rebuild for the money. But the money comes and goes. You know, the buildings don't stay. This is functional because the earth is a heat source and it costs less to heat. This is a native artist from Canada, Cree, Sonia Robertson, who had these beads come through from the wall of an art gallery to a tree, and the beads are in the 4 native colors, and they're hand-painted, each bead, by the artist. It's like rosaries, in a way. And in the tree, beside the tree, there's the sound of a human heartbeat coming from it. So this is, again, connecting to nature. The land artists came from performance. So early land art was often performance came, and then the land art. And this is a performance by Klaus Oldenburg, who was not a land artist, but did performances at that time, burying a sculpture in Central Park, New York. And Carl Andre, one of the early artists, more minimalist. This is an outdoor piece in America from hay bales, a line of hay bales. This is the curator of the first Earth Art show in America, Willoughby Sharp, and the lady who did the filming for the show. And this was around �69, and everyone was invited. Robert Smithson, Hans Hack, not Richard Long, but Dennis Oppenheim, many artists. The show was the beginning of the Earth Art movement because the editors came from New York by plane and all wrote about it. And after that it became a movement. However, the Europeans were different than the Americans. Americans, it was big. It was getting away from the art gallery. It was being in the desert with a bulldozer, maybe, like Michael Heitzer or Robert Smithson. And the gallery was considered a non-site, and nature was a site. They were tired of the gallery and the commercial world, and they worked that way. In Europe, the artists worked on a smaller scale. Why? Because they already had a different sense of resources and scale, because it's a heavily populated area. And so these two tendencies were modified when women became involved. In '75, some women artists, Mary Miss, Anna Mendieta, and so on, start to do earth art, which has to do with the body. It's not about out there, it's about the body and the relation to space in a different way. This is from the Earth Art show, first one. Cornell University. Robert Smithson read science fiction books. He was into science fiction, and that was one of his sources, and he was the only one from the West, from the East. This is interesting because they work large scale. All the others were from California, Washington, Oregon, Dennis Oppenheim, Heitzer. So their sense of space and what you can do with space was sort of colonial, let's say. It's the idea that you can use as much as you want and it doesn't matter. Yeah, so this is one of the mirror displacement pieces. This is a chainsaw piece cut on the border of Canada and the States by Dennis Oppenheim. There's a time zone difference between the countries, and secondly, the rings of growth of a tree represent time in a different way, which is what this is supposed to be. This is another early performance by Dennis Oppenheim, reading position for second-degree burn. It's a book on tactics, and he takes it off. It's almost autobiography of the artist, I would say. Yeah. And this is, of course, Smithson's Great Salt Lake piece. Well, the problem with the Great Salt Lake piece is it was considered as an action, and now it is a property which is owned by PS1 in New York, and the cost of going is about $1,500, I believe. So it's been privatized, you know, it's like a tour thing. And that's not the spirit of the real land art. Land art was never a commodity.
Absolutely.
Dennis Oppenheim did a piece with guard dogs in the desert, in the wilderness, the same dimensions as the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and that was his comment on this privatization. There was the dogs guarding the space, which had no value. It was so-called non-space. But that was another piece. This is in Italy, Alan Sonfest's Circles of Time. For him, he uses living trees and plants and rocks to create time collages. So he will reference in this piece Etruscan, Greek, Roman, Renaissance, modern, according to the species that would be living at that time, the types of trees and plants. And in New York, he did the time landscape, which was representing the landscape before the white man, the early Dutch settlers, and contemporary, in a piece of park that was reclaimed from the city. He took it over, the concrete was taken up, and it became known as time landscape. It's a famous piece in '69. This is Kensel Crop, which was the beginning of the Americans coming to Europe to do works at Sonsbeek in Holland, and he asked a farmer to harvest an X in the field, and the crop was brought into a gallery and exhibited as product. The idea is commodification of art, but also commodification of everything from nature. There he is. This is an artist from America, Herb Rust, called Dialogue, this piece done in South Korea. And here you have an entrance and two sides where you sit down. It's for people to communicate. So there's an opening through which you see the other person and you talk to them inside the structure. Anyway, yeah, and this is Dennis Oppenheim with me in the Earth Art Show in Canada. Before he died, he had liver cancer, unfortunately. The man who did the first Earth Art Show invited Joseph Beuys to America. Joseph Beuys planted the oak trees in Germany. It was a big social ecology action in 100,000 oaks, I believe. And in America, he didn't know what to do. He said, America is ill from the Vietnam War. I have to help America heal. So he brought a coyote into a gallery. Coyote is a trickster, but it's also a healer in the Amerindian culture. And the coyote lived with him in the gallery for 2 weeks. And they brought the Wall Street Journal each day, and the dog would piss on the Wall Street Journal, and that was it.
That was it. End of story.
This is another type of artist working in, he's both a sculptor, Chris Drury, but he also does some projects healing rivers by planting reeds and different kinds of plants to take out the toxicity and the pollution, in this case in Sussex, England, Lewis, Sussex, and the actual configuration is that of a heart. Theodor Schwenk, who is a theosophist, wrote the book on on patterns, water patterns in nature. And he was a member of this group from Germany. Who are they? This group in Germany.
Fluxus?
No, nothing to do with art.
Other?
Oh God, I can't remember. They work with handicapped people and everything. They're a spiritual group. But anyway, the idea is the energy patterns are in water, they're in us, they're in trees, they're in everything on Earth, in microcosm and macrocosm. So this is patterns from inside the human heart. This is another piece from a show in Finland by Chris Drury called The Spiral Vortex from birch trees. This is Ursula von Riedingsburg from America, one of her wood pieces. She's a very good artist. I think she's from Poland, her ancestry, and she lives in New York.
Is she from Poland?
Her ancestry.
Yeah?
Yeah. This is Christo, the Pont Neuf wrapped. Christo and Jean-Claude, I asked them, are these performances? They said, no, they're not performances. Then I said, what are they? They said, you cannot tell us what they are. I will never tell you. So I don't know what they are, what they do, the wrapped Reichstag and so on. But I always thought of them almost like performance because they disappear after 2 weeks, Yeah. This is Udo, who did planting as art in the 70s already in Bavaria. And his idea is that you use living materials to create your art, but the camera is very important in his work, often designing with the camera, light, color, the materials. They become nature collages in a way, but intentional and designed. This is not like that. This is another kind of work he does. But the idea of planting as art was not considered common at that time. It still isn't. This is Ana Mendieta, who is a pioneer of performance, actions, and so on in the art world, relating to Mother Earth often. And this is one of them. She uses gunpowder and many things, explodes things, and she committed suicide in the 80s in New York. This is a functional sculpture for sheep by David Nash. The sheep rub against the sculpture. It's good for their skin. This is more interesting. This is called Sotswap, which is, he lived in Wales, David Nash. He had no overhead because he bought a church for £500. So, unlike a city artist, he didn't have pressure, but he succeeded somehow. He made it. And I think this is a cool piece because it's an exchange from the city and the country. He cut a circle of earth, he brought it to London. He brought a circle of earth from London to the country. Now, what David Nash said to me in one of the interviews in the book, which is now in Czech, is that earth art, the largest audience is from the city because they're deprived of the experience of nature. So often when they see photos by Goldsworthy or other artists, they are attracted to them by association rather than experience. He said, if you go to the country, people don't like us. They don't like nature art. They like a straight line because they're always working with the earth and stuff. They're not into earth art. He says, the people in the city, though, they romanticize the beauty of nature and so on. Anyway, that's what David Nash thinks. This is a couple of artists from France who work together, Bruni and Dabaret. This is in Canada. We had a symposium in a park, a national park. In Canada, in the national parks, they tell you need permit to change anything. So they went outside the park to do their work because they wanted people to walk through the sculpture and so on. It's more human, let's say. because often national parks are like museums in Canada. The forests have fires because they don't allow anything to happen to them. So the wood packs up after 10, 20 years, and you will have more fires after that, you know. This is Urstwellen in Vancouver, in the West Coast. These are 2 dead trees. He cut them and resited them. He's from Switzerland. Huh?
Is it real photo?
Yeah, real photo. Yeah. He set it up after. I saw him in Korea cut a whole tree, the full length. It was amazing, right? Yeah. He has many chainsaws, big ones too. This is
you know, the biggest chainsaw what he has is like 2.5 meters.
I know.
I've been in his studio.
It's incredible,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, this chainsaw. Yeah. This is Benny Beaumont from New York, who is an artist who recycled coal to create a fish habitat off Fire Island in New York. So she made bricks from coal and they dropped it in the ocean because this area had no habitat for fish. And coral started to grow and so on, and it became a healthy habitat area for fish. So it was recycling from industrial into functional ecology project. This was Alan Sonfist in Montreal. He built this piece to show that nature is resilient no matter what people do. The tree is growing. It pushes the missile apart. This is a piece with garbage and art in Canada by Bruni Bavaret, a show I started, but it was taken over because I refused to accept an artist who had a piece called Babylon, because I think nature is not ironic, and I don't think that people have to be cynical about the state of human civilization, because nature will grow and happen no matter what we do. Anyway, so I quit the show, but I curated the show and then quit it because I didn't want a piece called Babylon in it. And so this was a half garbage, half primitive structure. Kind of juxtaposition of human culture and natural culture. This is another piece by Canadian sculptor in Morocco, Jean Briand, who is the French-Canadian, and he does interesting work, but more aesthetic quite often. This is Michael Singer, who became an architect. He's an artist who became an architect. Not enough money in art, and he started to do eco projects. In fact, in Prague, I believe, along the river basin, he did a restoration project. Maybe for migration routes for animals, I believe, creating pathways, connecting areas that weren't connected for a long time. If you look him up, you will see that he did a piece in Prague. But this is like an earlier assemblage with wood from the 70s called Ritual Blade Series. This is the ice sculpture from Canada in the 19th century. We were doing sculpture with ephemeral materials before. Everyone did, I think, even here probably, in Czech. This is Statue of Liberty at the Winter Carnival. This is Christo. This is one of the younger artists, Brandon Ballanger, who is a scientist who is involved in art. And this piece is called Collapse. It's about the Gulf of Mexico, where there's not enough oxygen in the water now, and the fish species are dying after these oil spills and so on. So the pyramid represents the interdependence of species, underwater species, which in biology, you know, there are pyramids, higher and lower species, small, bigger, and so on. So this is at Ronald Feldman Gallery in New York now, right now. This is the Goldsworthy piece. He, of course, was the superstar of this nature art because his books are so successful. His photos sell for $10,000 a piece at Galerie Lalonde in Paris. And that's how he makes money, through photography, books, marketing, and film. And the commissions are big commissions from the Metropolitan Museum and so on. There are different people who worked in the same generation. Some of them were not businessmen. Udo was less business, you know. Verschuren, Bob Verschuren, less business. So it's to say that his approach was simply to charge money all the time and be very hard about it. Other ones were not like that, and they didn't make their name as big. But it's up to each person to decide what matters and why. But an interesting artist is Chris Booth from New Zealand, who creates these works that are designed to disintegrate. The mushroom activity and fungal activity causes the wood to disintegrate, and slowly the stone descends over 10 years, let's say. So these are works where nature is active ingredient in the work. And I think his work is very interesting. He will have an underwater commission with Wellington City in New Zealand to create a huge underwater sculpture park. Sounds interesting. This is Bill Woodrow from England. The tree is consuming the knowledge, but the tree is knowledge too, at Trafalgar Square. Neville Gaby, in the shows that I do, he was one of the artists from England. He took a 200-year-old tree, which was dying from bacteria problems and so on, fungal, and created a cube, cutting it, all the branches and everything to fit into a cube. And the title of the work was the formula that biologists have for the amount of area a tree occupies from the bottom to the top, the crown and the root.
This piece was about compacting things.
Yeah.
This is great idea.
Yeah. And Richard was at the Earth Art also.
Yeah, I was there,
yeah. This is another piece by Chris Booth in Australia. And on the right is one of his stone blankets, which are woven stone pieces, very popular. New artist working in a different way. This is another piece from Vancouver at Van Dusen Gardens I curated. Here he had the native people come to the land to give their approval, because all of Vancouver was native land. So he brought the chief and the tribe there, and they did a ceremony to purify the land again. And then they put these recycled stones from that were in a park, which were part of the seawall that weren't used when they built the seawall, curved stones, to make flower petals. And in the center he planted a tree, which will grow and will push the petals apart over time. As it's a slow piece. It's not fast. It will take 20 years. Yeah. This is Ikeda, who's a very interesting artist from Japan, who he was a chemist and he became an artist later in life. And this was in Shinobatsu Pond in Tokyo. There were 1 million visitors, and most of his work relates to water, sacred water, water rights, also for the United Nations, that many people in the world do not have access to water. They don't have the 80 liters of water they need every week, is it? 80 liters, or is it every month? But anyway, so a lot of his work relates to water and water rights, and he does performances. This particular piece, they cut the lily pads, which were clogging the pond to the point that it could not grow anymore. It was too much. And so it restored the ecology while also being a kind of performance representation piece. This is another performance in Japan we did by a polluted river where they worked on it to restore it with the community who he organized and so on. He is one of the most interesting artists, I think, and doesn't show enough in Europe. This is David Nash piece. David Nash is working with natural materials, and he's involved in developing a language with natural art. And why is it important? Because nature is the source for our lives. Nature provides us with everything we need. If we only work with computers and video, we will lose our connectivity to nature. Children need nature. They don't need a video screen all the time, just part of the time. The loss of tactile experience in our cultures is a tragedy, and it won't help us in the long run. Because our economy is going to hyper-production and into high productivity where resources are wasted and so on, means that human beings tend to go into a culture of distraction rather than essential culture. The culture of distraction is designed to stop us from producing and being productive in a way where harmony is established and real value. So we work against real value now to create a culture of distraction. And Marshall McLuhan called advertising the cave art of the 20th century. Anyway, but why do we get into culture of distraction? Because it's good for business. But a culture of distraction does not encourage our happiness, our health, or anything. But we are afraid to leave that world that is presented to us in this illusionary way. Why are we afraid? Because the emptiness that we recognize. But it's not a bad thing, emptiness. You might find something there. We feel we miss something all the time now in the West. It's tragic, you know. This is one of the walking artists, Hamish Fulton, who he will go on a walk and he will write a poem, he will take photos, he will take these kind of collage pieces. This is from Alberta, when he was in Alberta, on the west in Canada, Sacred Magpie. Richard Long also worked with Fulton in the early days, and these guys had it down to a minimal thing, the action. And I believe in this myself. I believe that walking is a kind of editing. It's a creative state for the human being. I think it gives you the ability to think more clearly than to be sitting. And I think Aristotle knew that. William Blake did walking. Jack Kerouac wrote his book Standing Up, typing, and Victor Hugo too, standing was better than sitting. So I think it's part of the human consciousness, and it can make you able to create a kind of a filtering of thoughts. This is a Neil Pseudo Nast piece that he did in Germany, Lunenburg Heath. Animals have their own architecture, they're conscious also. And sometimes the crossover between animal architecture or natural architecture and human is an interesting one.
Hey John, from which year is it?
What this is, I think, 80s.
80s?
Yeah, 80s. You know, 86, maybe, something like that. Yeah, but he did them in the 70s also. Yeah, he was one of the first. This is Yetlova. Maybe she's from Czechoslovakia. Is she? Yeah. Magdalena Yetlova. This is in England, at Forest of Dean. And she did some very interesting woodworks, the stairs and so on, at Ludwig Forum in Aachen. And now she does laser work, I think. No? Laser? And
also.
Yeah.
She works with many materials and ideas.
Many, yeah. She changed a little bit. Yeah. She teaches in Düsseldorf.
Did you see her installation from Iceland?
No.
Very interesting.
I would like to see that. She teaches
the material.
Sand?
No, from
lava. Volcanic lava. Really? Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Anyway, she teaches at Düsseldorf. Academy,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. This is another artist from Taiwan, Roger Tibon, and his work is about ozone pollution, the holes in the sky, and he made a sculpture with holes that people can fill with straw or hay. This is Aztec artist who was in my show in Canada, Yolanda Gutierrez. These trees are the conduit between life and death in the Aztec mythology. So she created these healing plants, tobacco, sage, and white flowers in triple spirals going up the tree and around the tree. They believe that this is the way to communicate with the dead. You know? So, interesting artist. This is another Bruni Babaret piece in South Carolina. Just using the topography of a stream and building your work around the language that's already there. Sometimes when you use what's already there, it's more powerful. The best Inuit artists leave some of the stone. They don't carve it all. You know, because you let the language of the stone be part of it. It's more challenging, I think, you know, than carving everything modernist. This is Randall Page, Cornish granite piece, very large, from Eden Project in England, where they took an old mine site and turned it into a cultural destination with a gallery, education, and everything. So the idea is in England, they don't know what to do with these abandoned industrial places, and they're trying to find cultural ways of recycling. I went to Portsmouth also. I helped them in Portsmouth at the stone quarry to develop an amphitheater out of the old stone quarry for theater and so on. So you can do a lot with industrial sites. This is the roof of the Eden Project, which is based on biomimicry. Looking at nature's forms can sometimes save money and energy. This is, I think, from pine cone structure, the roof, it's lighter and stronger than human design structure. So we can learn from the nature structures. You know, this is Mario Ries, a German artist who puts his canvases in rivers all over the world, and then he collages them on the gallery wall, making a grid. Each stream or river is different according to the pollution and minerals that are in it. And it's interesting document of what's going on. This is Alfio Bonanno, who founded a sculpture park in Denmark called Teakop. And this piece is in Norway. Yeah. Cornucopia. This is Jörg Ronau from Denmark. This was last year in Montana. A community raised the money to create a sculpture park because there were no young people who stayed in the country. So they said, how are we going to get people to come here? Sculpture park, tourism. So they invited 5 artists, and one of them was Ronau. He put quotes from the native poets and the Indians and made a gateway from 2 dead pine trees. At the end of the gate, there's a little city covered in gold, in carved wood, which represents the old gold mining activity of the early colonials there. And on the other side, he carved a seat for people to sit in. This is T-Bone, also from Taiwan. Fiddleheads. Why do I show this work? Because in Asia and in India and many third world countries now, this working with nature as art is kind of already something they know. They didn't have to learn it. And they are taking it further than the West. The West, it's a kind of concept. It's art, capital A. But there, it's small a. And it's quite popular, and it's growing many symposiums in many countries: Taiwan, China, Korea, South Korea, India, many, Indonesia. So it's kind of fun. It's growing in many different ways now. This is from my Earth Art show in Vancouver, a lady who made costumes out of plants and berries and so on. And we had a fashion show at the opening. All these beautiful women with plants on them. It was great. This is Peter Hutchinson. He will be in my show this summer for the Pan Am Games, and he did these underwater pieces in the 60s, in underwater land art. You don't see it. And also around a volcano in Mexico, he put bread around the entire circumference of the volcano, which became moldy from the humidity and so on. And this was an action piece. This is a lady from Canada who does bees. Bees create the work. She puts objects in the beehives, and the bees continue the form and distort. She will put maybe a radio or a hockey helmet or a piece of porcelain, and the bees will work on the work even more. This is Bob Dylan. I wrote about him this year because he's doing sculpture now too. In Los Angeles, he has a studio and he's carving gates. Yeah, and he shows them in London, England, at the Halcyon Gallery. You know.
Bob Dylan.
Yeah. He has a studio, therapy, therapy. Maybe, I don't know. And this is Bob Verschuren from Belgium. I call him like eco-deco, he's very precise nature artist. And the petit bourgeois Belgians, you put the fork in the right place on the table. They do the same with the objects in art, very careful, Yeah. This is another Bratinsky photo of the earth from above. Again, like Theodore Schwenk, water patterns, looking like tree patterns or leaf patterns. So microcosm, macrocosm, energy in the earth. Yeah, this is a carbon dioxide cube from the climate change conference in Copenhagen, Alfio Bonanno, floating sculpture with many images projected by live feed from around the earth for people to see at this climate change conference. So this is a departure from him too. He's starting to use a bit of media. This is from northern Finland, Jaakko Pernu, probably one of the best wood artists, I think.
Yeah, I met him in Sweden once.
You did?
Yeah. On this not Biennale or something.
Yeah.
He came from Finland and I came from Poland. And I met him many years ago. Yeah.
He's very successful.
Excellent. Yeah.
Very successful now. Yeah. So I think that's enough. And this book, which is now in Czech, is kind of an introduction to this kind of art. I think it sort of helps people to see there's another path for contemporary art. And as Claude Lévi-Strauss said, nature has more variation than the manufactured product. It challenges you more. And so it's an infinite language. It's a great place to work as an artist. Yeah. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's great. Anytime, if you have questions, you can ask me, today or tomorrow,
So John,
great. Yes.
For me to see all these pictures.
Oh,
Artists I know, but these images I didn't know before.
Yeah, there are many. I have thousands, This is one of my World Walk poetry things in India. Here, I don't advertise them, but I will do a big show later from many countries. And I will include the Prague now. I will do a walk in Prague and make a text of words, a cube of words. And then all the words become a cube of words. And you can read them vertically, horizontally, diagonally.
woman's face smiles fast writing, she says, brick wall, path turning, moves, turns, we move like these words towards the main street, the close clutter of paper and artifacts of the human experience, day glow sticker, matchbook premium, sunflower, a motorbike stretched and worn newspaper, fragments float in the air, a relic of the media age on the earth, a slow and tiny stream, a rivulet, in fact, trickles across this cabinet of time. Water shaped like a leaf, dust and angels, side walls, birds chirp. A distant generator hides softly making white noise in the environment of this life in blue space. Axe chops, chop, 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 wood, piece of a trunk of a tree, elephant's dream, voice small, trees lean towards an open space with ceramics, a place of pots that pile and surround the smoke that comes from a fire. Chop, 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 chop. The wood like words, objects in space, cut slowly in time, saving space for other thoughts. A serif filters light with color. Birds come, birds go. Chattering, the birds fly, and a pig walks across the road, very slowly, head to the ground. A man pulls food from a tureen with a ladle. Shadows move the surface of things. Tomatoes piled on a fruit cart. Spice 500 grams. Bat, ladle, haircut. A barber looks out. The others read the newspaper. A cloud in the sky. No clouds in the sky. Dumb and flies. Ape auto P3S. Taxi tiger decal. Sticker on the window moves. The roof of a shrine silhouettes the sky. Two elephants. One is on the left, one is on the right. Garlands of roses, yellow flowers, inside glittering universe. Ganesh, smell of incense, a goat looking out at the long view. Pylons rusting in the center of the street, carry wires along the space in the heat, down the center of the street. In Pantapur, endless movement, endless motion, emotions, towards, away, away, towards, away, red rear lights, on the motorbikes, on, off, shoes and lines, a woman stands, a woman in shawls, all covered in shawls, sandals, car horns, beep, lines shuttered, closed, windows, open balconies. We follow the houses down the street. Far off sounds, nearby sounds. Dot, Krishna Bazaar, peppers, onion, garlic in burlap sacks. Instants of time, islands of time, seen here along the way. Shops at night, penetrate the shops, look in, you see green shoes, that old green
something. You know, John, the background, you know, these people, this is really cool.
Yeah, I know. It's nice to have the people in this. But I also put the signs in. Here also, the Czech signs. It's anthropology too. It's kind of living anthropology. I put in real words and signs.
Left one, right one, rhythm, dot, 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 stone, stone, stone. Mosaics lost in the mud, but always there, or here. Always there, or here. Here, never. Time escalates, covers the earth, extends out there.
That's a post box on the tree in the Jain district.
Always fan, stand, pink, hanging balances. Islands of memory, sowing the earth, memory carrying birds on our beaks. We walk, walking, waking, curtain, image, dreams like brass on a wall. Dogs, geometries of sound, biorhythms, water buffalo in the sewing shop, tea stands and incense, a donkey carries earth pots. Balcony, 100-year-old tree, a tree whose trunk is surrounded by stone, a concrete post box on the tree, old door, very old door, abandoned house, spider webs, car covered in cloth, Mira Barat Mahan.
One of my friends, he's just traveling to India on a motorcycle.
Really?
At the moment,
Beautiful.
right now.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Last message I got from him was from Rajasthan.
Yeah, nice. It's so beautiful, the energy. We are not so important. Yeah, that's the secret.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
You've been reading,